This is Psychonauts 2. Now, going into this one, I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest, because the original Psychonauts came out in 2005, so like 16 years ago. And I don't play a lot of 3D platformers, but of the ones that I have played, the original Psychonauts was my favorite of that whole genre, because I feel that it was kind of made for me. You know, when you find one of those games that feels like everything that is in it was sort of made for you, because it's sort of a mix of like 60s and 70s aesthetic with that sort of dark and interesting humor style that was common in stuff like Courage the Cowardly Dog and Invader Zim. It was very much like a mid-2000s Cartoon Network sort of game, very much steeped in the style of that particular time. So I wasn't sure about making a sequel to it because it's been a long time since then, and I didn't really know how they would manage to keep that alive, to do everything that was done with the original, because to me, going after the original is quite a pedigree to live up to, since it, like I said, was my favorite of the 3D platformers of that time. It's got a lot to live up to. I was actually one of those annoying kids that really liked the original Psychonauts before it gained its sort of cult following. I actually played it when it first came out, and it was very obscure at the time, and was constantly trying to get all of my friends to play it too, because I thought it was really awesome. So obviously for me, the original Psychonauts is a lot to live up to, and I wasn't necessarily going into this game expecting to be disappointed so much as I was just going into it with no expectations, because I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know how they were going to follow it up. You know, like I said, it's been 16 years. I didn't know exactly what they were going to do, but I'm happy to say that I was completely, entirely, 100% wrong to not really have any expectations, because they have somehow managed to make this not just a really, really good 3D platformer in the modern era, but also to make it a genuinely solid and worthy sequel to the original. It is a worthwhile follow-up to Psychonauts. It feels like Psychonauts, it looks like Psychonauts, it sounds like Psychonauts. Despite being 16 years later, it still has the same sort of style and is steeped in the same sort of mid-2000s Cartoon Network culture sort of feeling that the original was. They really actually did pull it off. The first thing I noticed was the way the game starts you out. I was expecting it to pull the similar thing to what a lot of sequels do, where they somehow make you lose all of your powers slash gadgets slash upgrades, you know, all the stuff that you got from the original game. They make you lose it somehow. And the first like hour or more of the game is a kind of slow-paced tutorial to sort of reintroduce everything very slowly. But in this case, they actually didn't do that, and I was really pleasantly surprised by that. You pretty much keep just about all of the powers from the original, and you'll start out with, you know, things like levitation, including the ball, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, clairvoyance, pretty much all that stuff that you had in the original just about. And I think it's kind of cool because it means that the game does not have a very slow start. It sort of reintroduces you to all these powers very, very quickly, and within like 20 minutes you have pretty much everything that you had in the original back, and you're just sort of expected to be able to use it all again. And this allows the first levels of the game to actually be relatively challenging and not like insultingly slow-paced. One thing about the original Psychonauts was that it wasn't an easy game. It wasn't like super crazy mega difficult, but it wasn't really, really easy. And I like the fact that they've actually been able to keep that intact with this game by giving you pretty much all of your original tools back from the very beginning, so even the first couple of levels are not slow tutorial levels to very slowly reintroduce everything, but instead are just full-on, relatively challenging platformer levels, complete with bosses and new enemy types and all that stuff, because they get the sort of reintroduction of these powers out of the way very, very quickly, don't spend a lot of time on it, and just allow you to sort of have your original toolkit back right from the start, so you can get on with the more complex level design right from the beginning and also start learning new things. You do gain a host of new powers in this case as well. I'm gonna try not to spoil too much in this video. You know, I don't really want to show any like major story scenes or cutscenes or really talk about like super late game stuff or anything like that, because I would like for you to experience that for yourself. So I'll try to keep this video fairly spoiler light. But as far as powers go, you do get a selection of new powers that are pretty fun to use. As far as level design goes, this game definitely outdoes itself. If you remember from the original Psychonauts, the hub area was very, very memorable, the camp, and all of the surrounding areas outside of the camp that you got to go to, like the big underwater city and the asylum, or the place where the milkman was and all that stuff. The hub was just full of personality and characters and was fun to explore, and you could, you know, find some collectibles and find some extra like side questy stuff to get other things, like the ability to dye your thought bubble different colors and things like that. Well, they've actually managed to keep that sort of thing intact here, and they've made the hub area of this game absolutely enormous. It is the Psychonauts HQ and the surrounding areas, including some caves, rivers, the questionable area, which is a sort of like kitschy psychotourism theme park, or not theme park, but like natural park kind of thing, and some other areas later in the game like Green Needle Gulch. And there is a ton to explore in these big hub areas. Just like the original, there's just all kinds of stuff that you can do. There's NPCs to talk to, and of course you can use clairvoyance on a lot of them to see how they see you and some other silly stuff like that. And there's also more collectibles and things to find in the world this time around, because there are things like Psy cards, which you can collect 9 of to upgrade your rank, which I'll talk about in a minute, and Psy cores, which actually upgrade your rank immediately upon finding them, but are generally much more difficult to find than the cards. They're usually in places that involve maybe some extra powers / gadgets to find. And there are, of course, loads and loads of people with side quests for you, from relatively simple side quests involving going to some sort of out-of-the-way, hard-to-reach areas for a specific item, to more like game-encompassing side quests that'll take you many, many hours to complete in between the other missions, like the big scavenger hunt one that you get early on in the game. There's a lot of side questing stuff to do in between the actual missions, so again, this hub is very explorable, and you're very heavily rewarded for exploring every nook and cranny of it, because generally you're going to find something, you know, either a card, or a key to a lockbox, or a lockbox itself, or a core, or something for an NPC quest, or something, you know, just like the original hub. There are tons of places to go, and the game very much rewards you for combining your powers in clever ways and reaching areas that you maybe thought that you shouldn't or couldn't, and more than likely if you do that, you will actually find something there. There's also a lot of extra voice acting and some other readable stuff that you'll find here and there, and like silly NPC encounters with cutscenes and things to really, you know, drive the characters home and give you reason to just keep exploring and finding new stuff. Now, just like the original game, the majority of the actual levels that you're going to be in are in people's minds. You will plop a door on their head and travel into their brain, and you will have their sort of brainscape to travel around in, and it'll be different for every character. This was a really unique part of the original Psychonauts. Because you were in someone's mind, these levels were allowed to have all sorts of weird geometries and things that didn't make sense in them because they were in someone's mental landscape. They were in a real place, so they're often very crazy, very inventive, very just strange to navigate. And they have definitely outdone themselves in that case with Psychonauts 2, because now the individual brains that you'll actually visit are extremely inventive and creative in terms of their design. They're all themed around something specific, from a crazy casino / hospital, yes really, to, you know, a barber sort of themed area with just everything made of hair and everything between. There are just tons of really fascinating level design choices here at a huge like psychedelic music festival where each of the musicians represents one of the 5 senses, and you can walk across bridges made of rainbows, to an enormous library of various different personalities of one individual person, where you actually have to do side-scrolling, like 2D side-scrolling sections inside of books' pages, jumping on words and pictures and things, and then go around the actual 3D platforming sections and huge like archives and stacks of books and moving drawers and things like that. I really enjoyed the big mail sorting area, by the way. There was a really cool section where you were in someone's mind, no spoilers, who was sorting the mail, and he was basically a giant mail sorting robot in the middle of this huge world made of like letters and envelopes and packages and stuff, and you had to constantly ride these letters and packages around the level and try and get put in the right boxes to get to the new areas of the level and stuff. It was a really, really cool, really visually interesting level, and I would have to say, just bar none, the level design of this game is absolutely its highest point. The level design of the individual brains is just so cool and inventive, and it really one-ups the original, honestly, in terms of, you know, taking what the original Psychonauts was known for and all these crazy mindscapes and just doing them with more modern technology now and more modern game development techniques. And they've, you know, I mentioned they outdid themselves, and I really do mean that. They've done an excellent job of creating some really fun and visually interesting levels to explore. Just like the original, by the way, there's a ton of exploration and collection to be done in the mines themselves. Although you, of course, have a set path that you're meant to go down, the mines are very large and open, and there's tons of optional little side areas and extra paths and stuff to explore, as well as different things that will open up as you get new powers, some of which you won't actually have the first time you visit the brains, but you, just like the original one, you can go to the collective unconscious to revisit old brains and obtain stuff that you may have missed the first time around, so you're not permanently locked out of them, which is nice. You have all the classic stuff to collect, as well as some new stuff. You have figments, just like the original, and there are tons and tons of figments hidden all over the place, some in plain sight, some in more difficult to reach areas, and all you gotta do is bump into them to collect them, just like the original Psychonauts. You also have the classic 5 different pieces of emotional baggage in each area, and along with the appropriate tags, usually hidden around the place, that you have to reunite with the baggage to make them happy. And now there are also some new collectibles like the half-a-minds, which are half brains. Literally, they have to reunite with another half, and they will permanently upgrade your maximum health total. And there's also the nuggets of wisdom that you can find. These are generally only 1 or 2 in each brain, and they're extremely well hidden and difficult to get to oftentimes, but they give you an immediate rank up. So let's talk about the whole rank system. This is new to Psychonauts for sure. As you collect figments and emotional baggage and all that sort of stuff, you will rank up over time, and your rank gives you these stars, and you can actually spend these stars to upgrade each of your powers. Every power has 4 sort of upgrade slots. The first one that you get as soon as you actually get the power itself, and then the next 3 are ones that you have to purchase with stars. Also, some of them are locked behind a certain rank, so you might not be able to get the 4th upgrade on one of them until you reach rank 35 or whatever. So this allows you to slowly work your way up towards upgrading each different power and making it more useful in different ways. This is pretty cool because it gives you a little bit of a sense of progression. It allows you to slowly augment your powers with new capabilities and make yourself stronger over time. There's also the new pin badge system. You will be able to get Psytanium, which is a currency from just exploring or killing enemies or finding chests or whatever. Just about everything awards some Psytanium, and in between missions, when you're back at the hub, you'll be able to go to these vending machines and you can spend Psytanium on various different things like consumables and carrying capacity upgrades for different things, but you can also spend them on these badges. Every different power that you get has a different number of badges that can be found or bought for it. And as you buy them, you can equip up to 3 at a time. You can have as many of them as you want total, but you can only equip a selection of 3 sort of as a set. The badges range from small cosmetic changes, like making your melee attacks have like a rainbow pattern to them, or changing the color of your thought bubble, just like the original, but they also have all sorts of other really useful functions that can, upgrade the number of bounces on Psyblast, or drastically upgrade the range and damage of your pyrokinesis and other stuff like that, giving them just enhanced capabilities in some way. So they're very much worth collecting and buying, because every time you get a new power, you get a whole new selection of badges that you can use to sort of augment your capabilities and change it up. Relevant to all these powers, by the way, is the new enemy variety. There's way more enemy variety this time around than the original Psychonauts. The original Psychonauts combat was not super difficult. It was relatively basic, but it sort of did the job. It was there and did what it needed to do. It wasn't anything special, but it was fine. And this time they've decided to focus a little bit more on that, giving your powers a lot more combat usage, and also making sure there's a lot more enemies to face. So of course you'll be fighting the classic sensors, just as normal, which will change their appearance based on whose brain you're in. But you'll also find things like doubts, which are flying enemies that drop things on your head and are very annoying, these sludgy monsters that need to be burned to be destroyed more easily, and some much more advanced stuff like bigger, different kinds of sensors, and these big judge dudes with huge hammers, and some really hard stuff like, for instance, the panic attacks, which basically need one of the powers to slow down time to actually fight them effectively. They've done a really good job making you prioritize different targets depending on what the sort of composition of each battle is, and also making sure that every different enemy type has a sort of weakness to at least one of your powers, making you want to switch up the powers you have equipped all the time in combat. Since each enemy has its own weakness, you always want to be applying that weakness as much as possible to sort of fight as efficiently as you can, because the combats actually can get quite difficult later on in the game. So I like that it makes you switch up your powers a lot to more effectively combat whatever it throws at you at that particular time. The voice acting in this game is stellar. It's really, really good. Somehow the original voice actor, who is also Invader Zim, by the way, sounds exactly the same as he used to. It's been a long time, but he still sounds identical somehow, and a lot of the other voice actors you will probably also recognize from that sort of period in time, as well as some new cast members, and they do a really good job. The humor of the game is just as good as the original. The use of comedic timing and the sort of darker humor, it's all intact, it's all very much like the original, and it's all really, really good. The story is in a really good place too. It starts off pretty much right after the original, just like a few days later it seems like, and it answers some questions that you may have had from the original, like for instance, what is the origin of this mysterious water curse, and the origins of the family itself that Raz comes from, and all that sort of stuff. It's all here. It's actually a really nice wrap up to some of the more mysterious aspects of the original, without focusing too much on what came before and being willing to introduce new stuff and actually continue a story. It feels like it keeps the momentum of the original going, because of the way it starts relatively quickly and not with like a super slow tutorial area for a long time reintroducing stuff. This means that even though it's been a long time since the original in-universe, it hasn't been that long, and they actually managed to make it feel like it sort of still keeps the momentum from the ending of the original going into the beginning of this one, which I think is quite a feat. how often do we really hear that a sequel to a decade-and-a-half old game is actually as good as the original, or is a worthy successor to the original? Very rarely do we see games that have been dormant for that long actually produce sequels that call back in just the right way while also building on what came before, so it doesn't feel like just like a hey guys remember this kind of scenario. But Psychonauts 2 manages to do both. If you played and loved the original like me, then there's a lot here for you, but if you've never played Psychonauts before, it's not so steeped in the original that you have to have played it to enjoy yourself. If you're at all a fan of the original, if you're a fan of platformers, of 3D platformers, of action adventures, of mid-2000s Cartoon Network, whatever it may be, do yourself a favor and play this game. Get it on Game Pass, get it on Steam, I don't care, just try it out because it is definitely a worthy successor to the original Psychonauts and is just a very, very good 3D platformer in its own right. It does pretty much everything right and was a genuine surprise to me that it's as good and as competent as it actually is. So thank you guys very much for watching. The link will be in the description below this video to the Steam store page if you want to check this game out. I definitely recommend that you do so. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.